Hey, welcome to my UFC Fight Night Derek Brunson versus Robert Whittaker breakdown. I am John Lee, and I'll be going through a couple of quick plays here on Thanksgiving because John cares if don't nobody else care. Last week, my bets went 2-1 for a win of a whopping .77 units. Which does make me profitable the last 4 UFCs in a row going back to Ferguson versus Dos Anjos. Not much, but I am winning every week, so that's kind of cool. At least I'm doing a little better than I was earlier as I've done these videos and been forced to do more research and make more logical consistency for my plays. My winning bets last weekend were a parlay of Ryan Bader and Claudia Gadelha at -175 and Krzysztof Jotko at +120, and my losing bet was a parlay of Ishihara and Horiguchi that in my video, if you go back and check, I said would probably lose, and it did, but I'll never learn. This week's card is difficult to pick winners on for me, mostly because I don't care about most of the fighters on this terrible card. I just really couldn't motivate myself in a holiday week with traveling and all that fun stuff to watch fights on like Tyrone Pedro. It was difficult enough to watch the 6 fighters that I watched on this card, and that really wasn't that fun. So this is a terrible card. This might be the worst card of the year, possibly. I know it was wrecked by Rockhold pulling out, but even if you throw Rockhold Jacare 2 on here, is this card much better? It's a little better, but still really weak. Having said that, bonus points if you get the Curb Your Enthusiasm joke. I did come up with a couple of plays. First, I'm taking Derek Brunson over Robert Whittaker, -140 for 1.4 units. This is a really close fight, and I totally understand everyone picking Whittaker. It looks like most of the sharp people I follow are picking Whittaker, and there's a lot of reasons for that. He's plus money, and this is a really close fight. I mean, this is close to a pick'em fight. He has great striking. Brunson, does stick his chin in the air and does tend to lunge and kind of rely on his athleticism to get into the clinch or get people to the fence. And Whittaker has some really sharp counter striking, good power, really solid looking wrestling defense. He's been stopping 91% of takedowns. He hasn't given up a takedown since 2013, and he's at home. The problem for me in picking Robert Whittaker lies in size and level of competition. As you know, Robert Whittaker came up from 170 where he wasn't super big. If you look at him in that Stephen Thompson fight, and granted Stephen Thompson's pretty tall, but he looked really undersized. I mean, he's a really small middleweight, and he's gotten away with that because he's got great timing, he's fast, he's got good wrestling, good shooting takedowns, like with kind of karate style. I think he's got karate in his background at some point. But he's small, man, and he's not very physically imposing, and he hasn't really fought the best competition at 185, with Uriah Hall being his best win. Whereas we know Derek Brunson can be competitive with the Yoel Romeros. He won the first 2 rounds of that fight before he got Yoel'd, right? And there's no shame in getting Yoel'd. Former champion Chris Weidman just got Yoel'd at 205. That's what Romero does to people. And yeah, he fought Jacare in Strikeforce and got smoked, but that was really way too big of a jump up in competition. But the point is, we've seen him against those guys. He got smoked by Jacare, and he was very competitive with Romero before giving up the late TKO. On the flip side, Brunson is by far the best fighter Whittaker has faced at middleweight. This is Whittaker taking a big jump up in competition, whereas it's a jump in competition based on the win streak he's on. Brunson has been fighting guys like Sam Alvey and Roan Carnero on this win streak, But he did fight Yoel Romero, and he has fought Jacare, so Whittaker is not the best fighter that Brunson has ever faced at middleweight, whereas Brunson is the best fighter Whittaker will have fought at middleweight, and I think that matters. He's also much bigger, has a reach advantage, and is a much better wrestler, though he does tend to do his wrestling on the cage, and as everyone from Patrick Wyman to Luca Fury have pointed out, he does tend to rush into the cage with his chin up, which gives a sniping counter-striker like Robert Whittaker a lot of opportunities to hit him. So that will be an issue. That is something to worry about with Derek Brunson for sure. But the last thing I want to talk about is Derek Brunson is just kind of nasty. Normally, I don't like when people talk about these esoteric, kind of ethereal, ephemeral things with fighters like killer instinct and nastiness. Outside of the top four and Bisping and the title stuff, the last year or so at middleweight has been defined by Mousasi and Derek Brunson just beating the hell out of dudes. Brunson fights these lower-level guys like Ron Carnero and Sam Alvey like he feels disrespected by having to fight him. He's angry, and I think that is part of why he comes out so reckless against them, because I believe that he thinks that he's being disrespected when he has to fight a Sam Alvey or a Ron Carnero because they're not on his level, so he just wants to get them out of there as quickly as possible. But if you look at the Lorenz-Larkin fight, which I think is the closest 185 comparison to Robert Whittaker that Brunson has fought, you see that he can pressure and fight a close fight against a good striker without being so reckless and running in chin first. So I think he'll be able to take Robert Whittaker more seriously, fight more fundamentally soundly, and be able to implement his wrestling, his size, and his pressure to get the win. The last thing is cardio. Both of these guys have slowed down in later rounds and gassed a little bit, especially Whittaker against Hall and Brunson against Romero. But I think that there's probably going to be some pacing themselves. Might even be a kind of slower pace fight in the beginning as these guys feel themselves out. I think both of these guys are going to be prepared. I'm not super worried about either of them gassing, but I could be wrong. So I totally understand picking Whittaker. I think there's a solid case for him, but I'm going to take Brunson and wrestling. Moving on to the second play, a parlay of Jake Matthews and Chris Camozzi. Jake Matthews is minus 335 and Camozzi is minus 250. So when I put it together, it was around minus 125. So 1.2 units to win 1 unit. I honestly don't feel great about this pick either. I thought Holdbrook lost to Ramsey Nijem, which would make him 0-2 in the UFC. Matthews is an okay prospect. He got murdered by Kevin Lee, who's definitely on an upswing. I do think this fight is closer than the line indicates, minus 330, but I still think Matthews is better. Pushes a faster pace, 7.2 strikes per minute to 2.6 for Holdbrook. He's younger, 22 versus 30, and he's close to his home in Australia. So you figure if it goes to the judges, he's probably going to get the nod. Holdbrook is decent, though. I mean, he's definitely not a world beater or a hot prospect or anything because, as I mentioned, he's 30, but he's a very strong grappler. He's 11-1. Should be 10-2, but he is 11-1, and he's a strong grappler as well as a southpaw. The second half of the parlay, despite the failure of my fade list last week when Ishihara was more interested in dancing with fat girls than beating Artem Lobov, I still believe in fading bad fighters, and I think Dan Kelly is one of the 5 or 10 worst fighters in the UFC. He's too old and too slow for Chris Camozzi, despite that weird Twilight Zone win over Carlos Jr., who I also don't think is good. Carlos Jr. might be near that 10 worst fighters in the UFC list. Camozzi is 9 years younger. Dan Kelly's 39, old man. We just saw a 40-year-old old man fight in the main event last week of Bader Nogueira 2, and Dan Kelly's just a little younger than him. 6-inch reach advantage for Camozzi, but Kelly is a southpaw, and he is at home, and he's tough. But Chris Camozzi should beat this dude. If Chris Camozzi loses to Dan Kelly, I mean, I don't think Chris Camozzi is good, but he's solid enough that he should win this fight. You know, he's 24-11 overall, but his losses are to high competition guys. He's got 2 losses to Jacare. He just got choked out or submitted by Talis Laitis. He tends to lose to those guys when he steps up in competition, but he tends to beat these guys, and he was on a little bit of a streak before that latest fight. So I feel like he is improving as a fighter. I mean, he's not great, man. His last, TKO win was against Joe Riggs, who just is done. He beat Tom Watson. They're not impressive. There's nothing super impressive about Camozzi. I just really think Dan Kelly's bad. So there you go. Probably going to lose this one. Watch Dan Kelly knock out. Overall, I'm really not super interested in this fight card, and will probably just DVR it and cherry pick the good fights. It's just really not compelling. I was trying to talk myself into it, doing the research and listening to podcasts and, trying to watch these fights. I only watched fights on these 6 fighters, and Kyle Noak, Omar Akhmadov. I guess maybe take a shot on Noak. I don't know. I can't bet on Kyle Noak. I just wouldn't feel like I'm protecting my money well enough. But yeah, it's not great. Hopefully it will not be too slowly paced, and hopefully we get a good main event. That's the best case scenario. So everyone have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you soon when I recap these bets and have my picks for the Demetrius Johnson versus Tim Elliott finale of The Ultimate Fighter, which I will actually be attending here in Las Vegas. So maybe I'll get on Periscope when I'm there or something, or post pictures on Twitter, because I will be there a week from tomorrow, December 3rd. Pretty exciting. Have a great holiday, guys and girls, and I'll talk to you soon.